Hospital corridor, 11 at night. Fluorescent lights humming overhead. A man stands frozen outside a half-open door, flowers wilting in his fist. He doesn't know what he's about to hear. Incise cuts through the gap, calm, precise. Nothing like a woman 2 days out of a stroke. It's pricing out a human being like an asset waiting on liquidation. His hand stops mid-air, inches from the handle. Then a name. His fingers tremble, his pulse climbs into his throat. The flowers dip lower, one petal falling silent onto the tile. He leans half a step closer to the gap, because the next sentence is the one that's about to end 6 years of marriage without either of them saying the word out loud. Need about 1,700 more words. Let me add 2 more scenes. Need to fix the duplicate line, 4 inches. That's the gap. A hospital door cracked open, and that's all it takes to end a marriage nobody's told you is ending yet. Darnell Cooper didn't know that. Not yet, he just knew his hand was already up, flat against cool metal, ready to push. Flowers wilting in his other fist, because the gift shop only had 2 bouquets left, and he'd grabbed the sadder one without looking. Because who checks the freshness of hospital flowers? Because his mind was already 3 steps down the hallway and not in his own hand. Room 412, St. Mary's, downtown Chicago. The kind of gray October evening where the sky looks like it's been left out in the rain too long and forgot how to dry off. His hand stopped, because a voice slid through that 4-inch gap. And it wasn't the voice of a woman 2 days out from a stroke. It was sharper than that. Precise, built for boardrooms, not for hospital beds, not for gowns that tie in the back. Vanessa, sweetheart. I know you think you love him, Deborah White, his mother-in-law, sitting up in that bed like it was a throne somebody forgot to upholster properly. But let's be practical. His hand didn't move. Couldn't move. Something in his chest just stopped. A circuit tripped somewhere behind his ribs and nothing downstream of it was getting power anymore. That man walked into this family with nothing. You gave him everything, your name, your connections, your father's business. And what has he given you back? A middle-class life. When you could have had so much more. 34 years old, senior electrical engineer, Sterling Power Systems. Still in his work boots because he'd rushed straight from a job site. Still smelling like conduit dust and the inside of a service van. Cancelled a site inspection to be here. Told his supervisor family emergency and meant every syllable. And this was what they thought of him, standing in a hallway. Listening to himself get itemized like a line on somebody's balance sheet. Mom, that's not fair. Vanessa's voice, weaker than he'd ever heard it. Darnell works hard. He provides for us. Provide them. Deborah's laugh cracked through the hallway like something dropped and shattered on tile. Darling, your father built Carter Development from nothing. That company's worth $47 million. Your trust fund alone could buy Darnell's whole neighborhood. And here you are. 3 bedrooms in Lincoln Park, a Honda. Shopping like a normal person. He makes $98,000 a year, Mom. That's a good salary. It's pedestrian, just that. 2 words. Flat as a slap. You were supposed to marry someone who matched what you brought to the table. Someone from our world. Do you know what Kimberly's husband does? Fund manager. 2nd house already in Michigan, right on the water. And Darnell has what? A state school degree, a job that barely counts as professional. Something folded in Darnell's stomach. Quietly, like paper, 7 years since the gala where he'd met her. He could still see it if he closed his eye. Which he did. Right there in the hallway. Because closing his eyes was better than looking at the door. A ballroom downtown, his company's table, 3rd from the stage, name cards nobody important would remember by dessert. He'd been standing near the bar not drinking anything. Doing the math on how soon he could leave without it looking rude. When a woman in a green dress asked the bartender for a club soda and told him, unprompted, that champagne made her sneeze and always had, since she was a kid. And wasn't that the most embarrassing possible flaw for someone raised on it? He'd said something about how sneezing seemed like a reasonable response to champagne. Honestly, all things considered. And she'd laughed. Not politely, for real. Head back, one hand flat against her collarbone like she was surprised by her own laugh, like it had escaped before she could stop it. What do you do? She'd asked, and he'd told her. Electrical engineer. Commercial systems. Watched her face for the flicker, the one he'd learned to expect from people at these things. The quick recalculation of how much attention he was worth. It never came. She asked him what that actually meant. Day to day. And he told her about load calculations and panel schedules and the small, stupid satisfaction of a building's lights coming on exactly the way you designed them to. And she listened like it mattered. Like he wasn't just filling air until the next course arrived. I'm so tired of talking about portfolios. She'd said at some point low. Just for him. Everyone in this room wants to know your net worth before they know your name. I don't have much of one to hide, he'd told her. Might be refreshing. She'd looked at him a long second. It is actually, she'd said. He believed every word of that night. Fell fast, fell hard. Because who wouldn't? Because that's what falling is. You don't check the ground first, you just trust there's ground at all. I love Darnell, Vanessa said. But there was a hole in the sentence. A gap where certainty should have been standing. She said it the way you say something you're trying to convince yourself of. Not something you already know cold. Love doesn't pay for the life you deserve. Deborah, sliding into that lecture register he'd heard 100 times over holiday dinners. And let's talk about children. You're 32. When you have kids, do you want them growing up in that neighborhood? Public schools? A father who checks his bank balance before buying them shoes? His parents left Mississippi in the 70s. Vanessa defending him now. Except the defense had no spine in it. No weight behind the words. Came up to Chicago looking for something better. Opened a diner in Bronzeville. He worked 2 jobs to put himself through school. Exactly my point. Deborah cut her off, sharp as glass dragged across glass. He doesn't understand our world. He never will. And I've seen the way he looks at your father's business. Like he's calculating. Like he married you already knowing what you'd inherit. A lie. A complete, surgical lie. 6 years. 6 years and Darnell had never once asked the Carters for a dime. Turned down the house money. Insisted on covering his own share, $25,000. Saved over 5 brutal years. Counted out like it mattered. Because it did. Turned down Harold's job offer, nearly double his salary, because he wanted something that was actually his. And somehow that independence had gotten filed under long con, under patient predator, under waiting for his moment. What are you suggesting, Mom? Vanessa's voice cracked on suggesting. Something in Darnell's chest cracked right along with it, same fault line, same second. I'm suggesting you think carefully about your future. Deborah, slower now, deliberate. You signed a prenup. Yes, but Raymond and I had the attorneys look at it again last week. It isn't as airtight as we thought. There are provisions that get complicated the longer you wait. The longer you're married, the more property tangles together. And with your father's health, the prenup. 6 back, 2 months before the wedding. A man named Raymond Harris in a mahogany office. A leather portfolio thick as a phone book. Standard procedure. He'd said, families of significant means protect generational assets. And Darnell had signed without reading past the first 3 pages because Vanessa's hand was in his, and she'd whispered it's just a formality. They don't mean anything by it. We'll be together. Forever and forever had sounded, at the time, like the only fact in the room worth trusting. You want me as a voice? Flat now. Stripped clean of performance. I want you to consider your options before it's too late. Softer. Which somehow made it worse. Before there are children. Before more years pass and the court starts seeing things differently. Your father's health isn't what it used to be, sweetheart. 2 years maybe. Possibly less. When he passes, you inherit your third of everything. Do you really want Darnell to have any legal claim to that? Do you want to spend your inheritance fighting him in a courtroom 5 years from now, when things finally fall apart? Silence. The kind with weight to it. The kind you can feel pressing against your own sternum from 30 feet away. Through a door. Through drywall. Through 6 years of believing something that was apparently up for negotiation the whole time. Darnell's hands were shaking. He could feel his own pulse in his teeth. Say something. Say she's wrong. Defend us. Defend what we built. Brick by brick. Weekend by week. Argument by argument. All of it real. All of it I don't know, Mom. Vanessa finally said. I just don't know anymore. 5 words. That's all it took. 5 words to reach into his chest and pull something loose that he hadn't known could be pulled loose. Not anger in her voice. Not outrage at the insinuation. Just doubt. Bare, exhausted doubt, like she'd been carrying these exact thoughts privately for months and her mother had simply beaten her to saying them out loud. He backed away from the door. Quiet. Engineer quiet, the kind where you calculate your own footsteps before you take them. Skip the loose tile near the vending machine. Skip the squeak by the nurse's station. Get to the elevator without existing at all. Down parking garage. His 2019 Honda Accord, the car Deborah found so embarrassing, and he sat behind the wheel and didn't turn the key. Couldn't, for a long minute, remember why keys existed. Flowers wilting on the passenger seat. Already looking sorry for themselves. Already looking like they knew something he didn't. His phone buzzed. Where are you? Thought you were coming to see Mom. He stared at it long enough the screen dimmed twice, went dark, lit back up when his thumb grazed it by accident. Sorry, Got held up at work, emergency at the Riverside site. I'll come by tomorrow. First lie of his marriage. 6 years and tasted wrong, even typed. Even silent. Even just thumbs on glass in a cold parking garage. But necessary. He needed a minute where nobody in the world was calculating what he was worth. He drove home. Lincoln Park. 3 bedrooms Deborah thought were beneath her daughter. Walked in like a stranger auditing someone else's life. The couch they'd picked out on Armitage, both of them laughing at how ugly the salesman's other options were. How the guy kept insisting gray was timeless. Photos from the honeymoon in the Florida Keys. Sunburned and stupid with happiness. Her nose peeling in every third picture. Both of them barefoot on a dock that wasn't theirs. The kitchen where they'd cooked 100 bad first attempts and 1,000 good ones after that. All of it looked staged now. A set. A performance he'd been giving for 6 years without knowing there was an audience keeping score in the wings. He opened his laptop. Did something he'd never done, looked up the Carter's net worth. Not because he wanted it, because he needed to see the size of the thing he was supposedly circling. 47 million. Chicago Business Journal last year, a glowing profile about a man who'd built an empire out of a single construction crew and stubbornness. Vanessa's trust, 8 million, set up by her grandfather the year she was born. Harold Reed. 62.
Stage 3 lung cancer.
18 months into a fight, he was still fighting like it owed him something. Split 3 ways when he died. Vanessa. Her brothers, Cedric and Victor, 15 million coming her way, give or take, and Darnell. According to paperwork he'd signed without a lawyer of his own, without reading it twice, without protecting one single thing that was his nothing. Not even the house. Bought with trust money. His name nowhere on the deed. His 25,000 quietly filed under gift. Like he'd handed it over out of the goodness of his heart, instead of building a life with both hands. A gift. Like he wasn't even a co-author of his own marriage. He sat back. Processed it the way he processed a bad circuit, traced the fault back to source. Don't guess. Don't panic. Find the break and name it. 6 years thinking they were partners. 6 years thinking every decision belonged to 2 equal people making it together. And the whole time he'd been standing in her world, on her terms, in her house. Without once noticing the floor under his feet wasn't his to stand on. His phone rang, her photo lighting the screen. Wedding day. Her laughing at something off camera, looking at him like he'd hung the moon on purpose, just for her. He let it ring out. She called, and again. 4th time he answered. Hey, where are you? You said 6. It's almost 8. Told you. His voice flat, careful. The voice you use with a client. Not a wife. Work emergency. Riverside's got a major fault. Need to review it before the contractor show tomorrow. Can't someone else handle it? Someone else, like his job was optional, like it could just be delegated the second her mother wanted him seated by 6. The same mother who'd spent 20 minutes explaining from a hospital bed exactly why he wasn't good enough. No. I'm the senior engineer. This one's mine. Fine. Now she sounded annoyed, and something in him almost broke at how easily she could still sound annoyed at him after what he'd just heard through a door. How's your mom, anyway? Stable, overnight for observation. They think it was minor. A pause. You sound weird. Just tired. Long day. Longest day of his life. If he was being honest with himself, which he mostly wasn't right now. Not even close. The day his marriage quietly died, while both of them kept pretending it was still breathing on its own. Can you come tonight? Mom's asking for you. Wants to apologize. For being difficult. The audacity landed somewhere behind his eyes. Apologize for what? Getting caught? Or was this already the next move? Smooth him over. Keep him compliant while everyone figured out how to extract Vanessa from the marriage with minimum spillage. Can't tonight. I'll see her tomorrow. Darnell, what's going on? You're being strange. Nothing's going on, just exhausted. I'll see you when you get home. Okay. He hung up before she could hear the crack starting under his voice. Before it could give away that something had shifted 6 inches sideways and hadn't stopped moving yet. Then he did the thing that would change everything. Pulled up his contacts, found a name he hadn't dialed in 2 years. Jonathan Wright, best man at his wedding, college roommate. The guy who'd given the toast about how Darnell had finally found someone who appreciated his terrible jokes and his obsessive attention to detail. How love like that doesn't come around twice. How lucky. How lucky. How lucky. They'd drifted the way friends do, life pulling in different directions. Texts getting shorter. Calls getting rarer. Until you're 2 people who used to know everything about each other, and now know approximately a job title. But Jonathan still practiced downtown family law. Divorce specifically, though Darnell had never once had a reason to remember that fact until tonight. Darnell Cooper. Jonathan picked up on the third ring, warmth right there. It's been what, 2 years? 3? How's married life treating you? I need your help. Silence on the line. Them. Because Jonathan had spent a decade learning the difference between a favor and an emergency, and this wasn't a favor. What happened? I overheard something today. Darnell's voice barely held its shape. Something that made me think I might not know my wife as well as I thought I did. Send me everything, Jonathan said. No hesitation. The prenup, any financial agreements, property deeds, all of it. I'll read tonight. Them. We meet tomorrow, 8 a.m. my office. Can you do that? Yes, don't thank me yet. Jonathan's voice went grim, humor draining out fast. If what you're implying is what I think you're implying, we've got a lot of work ahead of us. Darnell spent the next 3 hours tearing through the home office. Every document he'd signed since the day he and Vanessa started dating. The prenup thick as a paperback, the house deed, her name and only her name, joint account agreements, insurance policies. Even his car registration, which turned out he hadn't known this until now, hadn't thought to check, was also technically hers. A birthday gift 2 years back. He'd never once questioned it. Why would he? It was a gift from a wife in a marriage he'd believed was equal. He scanned it all, sent one massive attachment. Sat alone in the dark living room of a house that wasn't his, waiting, silence pressing in from every corner like it had teeth in it. Vanessa came home around 11, heels clicking on hardwood, her bag dropping onto the counter with a soft, expensive thud. Mom's going to be fine. Doctors think it's stress-related. She'll be out in a day or 2. That's good, he said from the couch, not looking up, pretending to read emails he wasn't reading. She studied him, head tilted the way she did when she was trying to solve him like a puzzle with a piece missing. You're being weird. What's wrong? And don't say nothing. 6 years married, I know you're nothing. Nothing's wrong. Thinking about Riverside. On a Wednesday, 11 p.m., she kicked off her heels. Sat close enough he caught the Chanel drifting off her collarbone. Another thing that cost more than seemed reasonable now that he was counting. Talk to me. What's really going on? He looked at her, really looked. 7 years of loving this woman. 6 married to her. Imagining a porch neither of them had picked out yet, imagining a life that stretched forward in a straight line. And he wondered, had she ever loved him at all? Or had he always just been a disappointing investment she'd convinced herself might eventually pay out? Do you think I'm good enough for you? Quiet. Even. She blinked, caught off guard. What? Of course you are. Where's this coming from? Just answer. No deflecting. Do you think I'm good enough for you? You're a good man, Darnell. You work hard, you're kind, That's not what I asked. Because I heard something today. His voice stayed steady even though nothing underneath it was steady at all. Something that made me wonder if I've been living in a fantasy for 6 years. Something that's making me question everything I thought I knew about us. Her face lost its color so fast it was almost frightening to watch happen in real time. What did you hear? He could have told her right then. I was outside your mother's room. I heard every syllable. I heard her call me pedestrian. I heard you say you don't know anymore. But something stopped him. An instinct he didn't know he had until it fired, cold and sudden, low in his gut. Don't show your hand, not yet, not like this. I heard myself, he said instead, asking questions I should have asked a long time ago, whether we're actually equals in this marriage, or whether I've just been fooling myself the whole time. Relief. That's what crossed her face. Just a flicker, gone almost as fast as it landed, but he caught it. And that flicker told him everything he needed to know. She'd been afraid he'd found out about something specific, which meant there was something specific to find. Which meant somewhere underneath everything she already knew what her mother had said was wrong, and let it happen anyway. Stood there, didn't stop it. You're being paranoid, she said, standing up too fast. You're stressed about work and taking it out on us. I'm going to bed. We can talk when you're being rational. She went upstairs. Footsteps heavy on treads they'd refinished last year with her trust money. He'd learn later. Though he didn't know that yet. Hadn't thought there was a reason to ask. His phone buzzed the second her bedroom door clicked shut. Jonathan. Darnell, I've read through everything. This is worse than I thought. Call me first thing, and Darnell, don't sign anything else. Don't agree to anything. Don't make any big decisions until we talk. He read it 3 times, jaw tightening a little more with each pass. They had no idea what was coming. The Carters thought they were the only ones at the chessboard, moving pieces around with practiced precision while everybody else just admired the furniture. They thought Darnell was the nice, simple engineer. Too in love to see the play developing. Too intimidated by the money to fight back once he did. They were wrong about that part. Very wrong. He didn't sleep. Lay in the guest room, his own house. And he chose the guest room. Which told him something about where things already stood, staring at a ceiling fan that wasn't moving. running the conversation on a loop until the words stopped meaning anything and just became sound. Pedestrian. Calculating. I don't know anymore. 3 fragments looping in the dark like a stuck record, except records don't ache the way this did, deep in a place he couldn't massage out with his thumbs, somewhere around 1 a.m. He got up and stood in the doorway of their bedroom, just looking at the shape of her under the covers, breathing slow and even like nothing in the world had shifted. He almost woke her, almost said everything right then. No strategy, no Jonathan, no waiting for Saturday, just the truth, laid out flat between them like a bill finally due. But he thought about the flicker of relief on her face downstairs, the way it had come and gone so fast, and he understood, standing there in the dark, that if he told her everything right now, she'd have all night to build a story around it before morning. She was good at stories. Her whole family was. He needed her caught without a script, not comforted with time to write one. So he went back to the guest room, lay back down, stared at the fan some more. He thought about the wedding briefly, before he could stop himself, her father walking her down an aisle in a backyard in Lake Forest. String Lights, a jazz trio from the South Side that Darnell had insisted on hiring himself, paid for out of his own pocket. One of the only pieces of that whole day that had been entirely his choice. Harold had shaken his hand afterward and said low, just between them, you take care of her, son, and I'll take care of you. And at the time it had sounded like a blessing. Standing in the dark 6 years later, it sounded like the opening line of a contract nobody had let him read the fine print on. Around 3 a.m. he called his mother, because some instinct older than the last 6 hours told him to. She picked up groggy, worried, the way mothers do when a phone rings at that hour. Baby, what's wrong? Nothing, Mom. Couldn't sleep. Wanted to hear your voice. At 3 in the morning, he almost laughed, almost cried instead. Landed somewhere in between, which came out as nothing, just breathing on the line. Your father used to say she started, and stopped, and started again, like she was deciding whether tonight was the night to say it, He used to say a man finds out who he married the day he can't afford who he married anymore. Didn't understand it myself for years. You understand it now, don't you? He didn't answer. Didn't have to. Whatever's happening, baby. You come from people who built something out of nothing twice. Once in Mississippi, leaving it. Once here, starting over with a diner and 2 jobs between us. You'll figure this out. You always have that in you, even when you don't believe it's there. He thanked her, hung up, didn't sleep anyway, but something in his chest had eased a fraction of an inch, which at 3 a.m. felt like a great deal. Jonathan laid out the strategy at 8 sharp the next morning, in an office in the Loop that felt honest in a way the Carter's mahogany fortress never had. Cheap carpet, a coffee maker that had seen better decades. Diplomas hung slightly crooked, like nobody'd had time to fix them, and nobody minded. Don't let them know you know, Jonathan said, spreading Darnell's documents across the desk like evidence at a crime scene nobody'd called in. Yet, right now they think you're clueless. Just the nice, naive guy who loves their daughter and doesn't understand how money works. That's your advantage. Let them make the first move. Let them show you the whole play before you counter a single piece of it. How bad is it? Darnell asked. The prenup. Jonathan flipped a page, tapped it twice with one finger. No independent counsel on your side. Big one. Judges hate that. Makes it look coerced even when nobody meant it that way. I signed it because I trusted her. Doesn't matter what you meant. Matters what it looks like on paper. He flipped another page. And this full financial disclosure. You see anywhere in here where they listed out the trust fund? The actual number? No, because it's not here. Which means they didn't disclose it fully when you signed them. Which means, down the road, if this ever needed challenging, we'd have grounds, real ones. Not guaranteed, nothing's guaranteed, but real, so it's not airtight, it's not airtight. Jonathan sat back, chair creaking under him, which is exactly why her mother's suddenly worried about it 6 years later. People don't panic about paperwork that's already solid. They panic about paperwork with holes they just noticed. Darnell rubbed both hands down his face. So what do I do with that? Nothing. Yet. Jonathan's voice went firm, almost a warning. You do nothing, you say nothing, you sign nothing. You let them think the paper's still bulletproof. Because the second they think you know it isn't, they change strategy. And right now their strategy is the only thing telling us what they're actually scared of. Darnell nodded. But underneath the nod, one question circling them, kept landing, kept refusing to sit still no matter how many times he tried to set it down. 6 years, was it really just a bad investment in the eyes of the person he loved most in the world? Or was there something real still buried under all this wreckage? Something worth the work of digging out before it hardened into something permanent and unreachable. He didn't have the answer. Not yet. He drove to the Cook County Recorder of Deeds office on his lunch break the next day. Told himself it was just due diligence. Knew underneath that, it was something closer to needing to see it in black and white, needing a stranger behind a counter to confirm what a laptop screen had already told him at midnight. The clerk barely looked up. Address, he gave it, waited while she typed. Watched her face for nothing in particular. Because clerks don't have flickers. Clerks have deadlines. Sole owner listed, she said. Vanessa Carter. You looking to add a name? No, he said. Just checking something. Happens more than you'd think. She said. Not unkindly. Already sliding the printout across the counter. People get married, figure everything's automatically shared. Illinois doesn't work that way unless you put both names on it at closing. He thanked her. Folded the printout into quarters like it might stay smaller that way. Sat in the Honda in the parking lot for 10 minutes before he trusted himself to drive, staring at his own name's absence like it was a word in a language he used to speak fluently and had somehow, without noticing, forgotten. Work didn't stop for any of this, which felt insulting in a way he couldn't fully explain to himself. He sat through a site meeting at Riverside 2 days later, nodding at load calculations he'd normally have caught in his sleep. Missed a panel schedule error a first-year apprentice would have flagged, and had to catch it on the second pass quietly, before anyone noticed. A coworker leaned over at one point and asked if he was feeling all right. Man, you look like you haven't slept in a week. Fine, Darnell said. Just a lot going on at home. The coworker nodded like that explained everything. Because in a way it did, and didn't push, because that's the unspoken rule among men who talk in load calculations. Instead of feelings you get one sentence, you don't get asked to elaborate. And that's supposed to be a kindness. Most days it was. Today it felt like being handed a door and told to carry the whole weight of what was behind it by himself, all the way to the truck, all the way home. He almost told him anyway. Stood there with the words halfway up his throat. My wife's family thinks I married her for money. My wife might agree with them, and swallowed it back down instead. Because saying it out loud made it real in a different way than hearing it through a door had. Hearing it, he could tell himself he'd misunderstood the tone, misjudged the context. Saying it himself, to another person, in daylight, in his own voice that would make it permanent in a way he wasn't ready for yet. So he just said, yeah man, thanks, and went back to the panel schedule, and got every number right the second time through, because that was the one part of his life that still made sense on command. He drove through Bronzeville on his way to the hospital the next afternoon, which wasn't on the way at all, which cost him 20 extra minutes he didn't have. The diner was gone. Had been for years a check-cashing place now, bars on the windows, a mural half-finished on the side wall like somebody'd lost funding halfway through. He parked across the street anyway, sat there a minute. His father used to stand behind that counter 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, and never once complained about it in front of the customers. Saved all the complaining for after close. Low and tired at the kitchen table with his mother. The two of them counting the register in a language that was half numbers and half exhaustion. Darnell used to do homework in the back booth. Learned fractions off the specials board before he learned them in school. Nobody at that diner ever once asked what his family was worth. Worth wasn't a word that came up. You were worth what you did that day, and what you did the next day, and that was the whole ledger. He thought about Deborah's voice through the door. Pedestrian. Thought about his father's hand. Permanently stained at the knuckles from grill grease that never fully came out. And how those hands had built something too, just not the kind that got profiled in a business journal. Not the kind anybody's mother would brag about at a dinner table with crystal on it. He pulled back onto the road. Late now, didn't care. He visited Deborah in the hospital that afternoon. Pink roses this time, because Vanessa had mentioned once, years back, in passing, that her mother preferred them to white. Sat by the bed. Made the kind of small talk that costs nothing and reveals nothing. While she smiled, that practiced smile of hers, the one that never once made it up into her eyes. Not once. Not even by accident. Darnell, dear. She reached for his hand with a grip too firm for a woman 2 days out from a stroke. I want to apologize for being difficult these past few years. I know I haven't always made you feel like part of the family. It's okay, he said, squeezing her hand gently while the phone in his jacket pocket ran silent and steady. Red light he couldn't see but knew was there. Family's complicated, I understand that. They certainly can be. Vanessa's my only daughter, you understand. After 2 boys, she was my precious girl. I just want what's best for her. So do I, he said, them. And meant it. Somehow, despite everything sitting between them now like furniture nobody would name out loud. Of course you do. You're a good man, Darnell. She patted his hand, a gesture that might have read as maternal to anyone not paying attention. That's why I know you'll understand when certain changes need to be made. For her sake. For her future, them. The sentence sat there in the antiseptic air loaded, them. Deliberate, them. And he just nodded, them. Kept playing the husband too simple to catch the subtext underneath it. Let her believe every second of the performance. That night Jonathan listened to the recording and whistled low, a sound somewhere between professional admiration and open disgust. She's setting the narrative, he said, them. Building the story where she's the protective mother, and you're just an unfortunate obstacle standing between her daughter and happiness. I've seen it before, just never this clean. So what's my next move? We wait, we gather them. Every conversation, them. Every suggestion, them. Every inch of pattern. Because if this ever gets near a courtroom, them, we need to show bad faith laid out end to end. Not just one bad night that could get explained away, them. Cedric called him 2 days after the hospital visit. Vanessa's older brother, them. The one who'd always been decent to him in a distracted, them. Half-present way, them. Like a man who liked Darnell fine but had never once thought about him outside of holidays, them. Heard moms do no real warm-up to it. Also heard you two had some kind of thing going on. Everything okay? Fine, Darnell said. Just a rough couple weeks. Yeah, well, family's a lot right now. Dad's numbers aren't great, in case nobody's told you straight. Mom's trying to hold everything together with duct tape and a prayer, and Vic and I are just trying not to make it worse. He paused, them. You're good people, Darnell, I mean that. Don't let my mother's mouth run you off. Appreciate you saying that, I mean it. She loves hard and she's terrified, and terrified people say ugly things to the nearest safe target. Doesn't make it right, just makes it familiar, I guess. Anyway, take care of my sister, Darnell said he would, them. Hung up wondering if Cedric had any idea what his mother had actually said in that hospital room. Wondering if terrified people say ugly things or if sometimes ugly things are just what's underneath the whole time waiting on an excuse. The evidence kept arriving faster than he expected, them. 3 days after Deborah's discharge, them. Vanessa mentioned, them. Over dinner, casual as passing the salt, them. That her mother wanted them out at the Lake Forest estate for dinner, them. Small family thing, she said. 7 o'clock, dress nice. Darnell had visited Harold 3 times in the past 6 months. Apparently that wasn't enough. Or maybe Harold was asking for a different reason entirely, one nobody had said out loud yet, one that wouldn't come clear until Saturday's table was set and the wine was poured. He said yes, because saying no wasn't part of the plan anymore. Because the plan now was simple, cook them, and exact. Let them show their hand completely, and be ready before the cards even hit the table. He hung around the kitchen that night after confirming the time with her, running his thumb along the edge of his wedding ring, like it might tell him something the last 2 weeks hadn't managed to yet. Outside, a car alarm went off 3 houses down and nobody bothered walking out to shut it off. He thought about his father's line again, a man finds out who he married the day he can't afford who he married anymore, and understood fully now, with a weight that settled into his chest and stayed there like it planned on renting the space long term, that the sentence had never been about money at all. It had been about the moment the mask slips, and his had just slipped 6 inches through a 4-inch gap in a hospital door. Because here was the truth underneath the truth. It was never really about the 47 million. Never about the trust fund or the deed or the prenup sitting in Jonathan's file cabinet like a loaded gun nobody had fired yet. It was about 5 words spoken through a crack in a door. I don't know anymore. 5 words that told him more about his marriage than 6 years of anniversaries ever had. Which meant the real fight hadn't started. Not yet. This the recordings. The documents. The quiet. Careful accumulation of proof this was reconnaissance. Saturday, at a table set with crystal worth more than his car, the Carters were going to make their real move. And for the first time since he'd stood frozen outside room 412, Darnell Cooper felt something other than heartbreak sitting where his heart used to be. He felt ready, which surprised him more than anything else had all week, because ready wasn't a feeling he'd expected to find anywhere inside a week this bad. Ready wasn't grief. Ready wasn't rage, though rage was in there somewhere, banked low like a pilot light. Ready was something colder and steadier than either of those, the particular calm of a man who's finally been handed a problem with an actual shape to it, after 2 weeks of drowning in one that had none. He thought about the diner again briefly, the way he kept doing lately without meaning to. His father, closing out the register at midnight, never once raising his voice about a bad night. Just recalculating what tomorrow would need to look like to fix it. That was the inheritance nobody at that Lake Forest table would ever understand or put a dollar figure on. Not the 47 million, not the trust fund, just the ability to take a bad number and turn it into a plan without falling apart in the process. His phone buzzed on the counter, late past 11. Vanessa, already upstairs, already behind a closed door. Don't forget Saturday. Mom wants everyone there, Dad especially wants to see you. He stared at the screen a long moment, typed back 2 words, I'll be there, and meant them in a way that had nothing to do with obligation and everything to do with the war nobody in that family knew had already started. Because Saturday he was walking into that house as the man they thought he was, the simple one, the grateful one, the one who didn't understand how money worked, who'd never think to look under the floor of his own life and find out whose name was actually on the deed. And Saturday, for the first time in 6 years, that would be exactly the advantage he needed. He turned off the kitchen light, stood a moment in the dark listening to the house settle around him the way houses do late at night, all its small ticking sounds like something breathing. Upstairs Vanessa's light clicked off too, right on schedule, no idea what was coming, no idea her own husband had spent the last 2 weeks becoming a man who planned 3 moves ahead instead of the one who used to just show up and love her and call that enough. 6 years he'd trusted that showing up was enough. He climbed the stairs slow, passed their bedroom door without opening it, went to the guest room instead, because that was where he slept now, apparently, in a house with his name on nothing, married to a woman who didn't know yet that Saturday was going to change both of their lives whether either of them was ready or not. He lay down, closed his eyes, and for the first time in 2 weeks, sleep actually came, not peaceful, not easy, but real, deep, the kind of sleep that only shows up once a decision's finally been made and there's nothing left to do but wait for the day it demands. Need about 400-500 more words. Need about 200 more words, 6,815 words within range. Now outputting the full text, Saturday came in gray and cold, the kind of Chicago October that makes you question every decision that led you outside. Darnell stood in front of the closet a full 10 minutes before pulling out the charcoal suit, the wedding suit. He hadn't worn it since a client dinner 2 years back, and even then it had felt like armor he was borrowing. Tonight it felt like something else, a costume for a role he already knew the lines to. Vanessa came down the stairs in a dress the color of good scotch, hair pinned back, every inch the daughter her mother had spent 32 years assembling. She looked at him in the hallway mirror's reflection instead of directly. You okay? You've been quiet all day. Fine, just tired. You've been saying that a lot lately. Because it's been true a lot lately, he thought, and said nothing at all, because saying nothing had become its own kind of language between them this month, a dialect made entirely of things withheld. The drive to Lake Forest took 40 minutes up the Edens, traffic thinning the further they got from downtown, mansions replacing high rises, the whole landscape shifting from concrete to hedge-lined privacy the way money always seems to prefer. Vanessa fiddled with the radio, turned it off, turned it back on, nervous energy with nowhere to go. Dad's been asking about you, she said. He worries you two have drifted. We haven't drifted. You visited 3 times this year, which is 3 more than most sons-in-law manage, he almost said, and swallowed it. Because tonight wasn't the night to keep score out loud. Tonight he was keeping score somewhere else. Somewhere with a red light and a leather case in his glove compartment. The Carter estate sat behind iron gates that swung open on some remote signal Vanessa triggered from a keypad in her purse. 3 acres of manicured lawn sloping down toward a lake gone slate-colored under the clouds. The house itself, brick ivy climbing one whole wing like it had been commissioned specifically to climb there, had made Chicago Magazine's Most Beautiful Homes issue 2 years running. Darnell had never once felt anything but small inside it. Harold met them in the foyer, thinner than 6 months ago. His handshake, once the kind that left your knuckles aching, now felt like closing your hand around a bundle of dry kindling. Darnell. Good to see you, son. Good to see you too, Harold. How are you feeling? Like death warmed over. Harold's laugh turned into a cough halfway through, the kind that made everyone in earshot go quiet and pretend they hadn't noticed. But the doctors say I've got some good months left. Maybe see one more Christmas if I play my cards right. Dinner was served in the formal dining room, chandelier throwing soft gold light across a table that could seat 16 and tonight seated 4. positioned like pieces nobody had asked to be moved. Deborah at one end, Harold at the other, Darnell and Vanessa facing each other across a floral centerpiece the size of a small hedge. The meal came out course by course, prepared by somebody Darnell had never met and would never meet, plated with the kind of precision that made him feel underdressed even in the wedding suit. Small talk drifted through the usual channels: Vanessa's work at the gallery, questions about Darnell's projects delivered with just enough condescension to remind him what he did for a living, Deborah's recovery and the wonderful doctors at St. Mary's. Then over the main course, Deborah set down her fork with the kind of deliberate precision that told Darnell the small talk had been a runway. Nothing more. Harold and I have been meeting with our estate attorneys, getting everything in order. You understand, with his health, we need to be prepared. Of course, Darnell said, cutting into something expensive he couldn't fully identify. That's very responsible. We've been reviewing everything. Succession plans, trusts, property holdings, making sure the right people benefit from everything Harold's built. Everyone meaning family. Harold adding this like he was reading off a card someone had slipped him under the table. The people who understand what this legacy means. Darnell looked up, met Harold's eyes across the centerpiece. Something there he couldn't quite name: apology maybe, or warning, or just the exhausted acknowledgement of a man watching something happen that he didn't have the strength left to stop. Of course, Darnell said again, family comes first. That's what I was raised to believe too. Which is why, Deborah said, we wanted to talk to you both tonight, about the future, about opportunities. Vanessa's fork scraped against her plate, a small sound that landed in Darnell's molars like static. She hadn't touched more than 3 bites all night. We've been thinking, Deborah continued, that it might be time for Vanessa to take a more active role at Carter Development. With Harold's health declining, we need family who can step up, real family, people with Carter blood in their veins. The implication sat there on the tablecloth like a stain nobody was going to mention out loud. Darnell had heard it before, in different words, through a hospital door. But hearing it in person, across a table, with Harold nodding along like a man reading someone else's script that was new, that landed different. Vanessa's always been interested in the business, Darnell said carefully, playing his part with an engineer's precision. I think that's a great idea for her. The thing is, Harold said, and now his voice went apologetic, regretful, a man delivering bad news he wished someone else could carry instead. The position we're considering would require significant time, possibly relocation. We're expanding operations to Austin, luxury condos, mixed-use developments, a whole new market. Darnell felt the trap's teeth settle in around his ankle, quiet and precise, because that's what this was, a trap dressed up as a promotion. Except nobody at this table was going to call it that out loud. Because calling it that would mean admitting the whole dinner was theater. The wine was theater. The roses on the centerpiece were theater. And theater only works if everyone agrees to stay in character, which everyone at this table had. Everyone except him. And he wasn't sure yet whether Vanessa even knew she was in a play. Austin, Deborah said, brightening, her enthusiasm rehearsed to a shine. Wonderful city, incredible growth market. And the position comes with real compensation. Vice President of Development. $250,000 to start, plus equity in the new division, plus performance bonuses. She could easily clear $350 in the first year. Vanessa stared at her plate, fingers wrapped too tight around her fork. That's an amazing opportunity, Darnell said, and meant every syllable to land somewhere they'd feel it later. When would this start? What's the timeline? As soon as possible, Harold said, coughing lightly into a napkin. Division launches first quarter. 6 weeks to get everything in place. 6 weeks, 1,200 miles between Chicago and Austin. Between Darnell and whatever was left of his marriage by then. And Darnell, Deborah said, her smile turning sharp as something recently sharpened. We understand this would be difficult for you. Your career's here. Sterling power, your projects, your colleagues. We wouldn't expect you to uproot everything. There it was, laid out on good china, next to the wine glasses that cost more than his monthly car payment. Vanessa moves to Austin for the opportunity of a lifetime. Darnell stays in Chicago because his pedestrian job can't possibly transfer. Distance does what nobody in this room has to do out loud. It strains a marriage quietly, over months, until nobody's the villain and the ending just arrives on its own. I appreciate you thinking about her career, Darnell said, slow, deliberate, tasting each word before he let it out. This is obviously something we need to discuss as a couple. Of course, Deborah said, smooth as poured cream. Take all the time you need. Though Harold and I would need an answer by end of next week. Friday, at the latest. The position won't wait indefinitely. The implied threat sat there next to the untouched wine. Decide fast. Decide before there's time to think too hard about why the timeline's this tight. Dessert came and went, something French he couldn't pronounce and didn't try to, and the conversation drifted back to safer ground. Vanessa's brothers, Deborah's charity work, Thanksgiving plans nobody at that table fully believed would go the way they were describing it. Darnell smiled through all of it, agreed at the right moments, felt every word land like glass in his mouth. The drive home ran in silence for the first 15 minutes. Lakeshore Drive stretched out dark and wet under the headlights. The lake somewhere off to the right, invisible except for the absence of buildings where it should have been. You're angry, Vanessa finally said at a red light. I'm processing. It's a good opportunity. It's a great opportunity. His eyes stayed on the road. Vice president at 32. $250,000 equity bonuses. Most people would kill for it, but Austin's 1,200 miles away, and somehow he didn't think that was an accident. She was quiet long enough that he glanced over, checking whether she'd fallen asleep or just fallen somewhere further away than sleep could reach. She was staring out the window at nothing, at dark water he couldn't see either. What do you want me to say? She asked finally. I want the truth. Are you planning to leave me? Is this whole Austin thing just a softer way to get there? No. But the word came too fast. Too rehearsed. That's crazy, Darnell. This is about work. About finally doing something that matters instead of curating shows for people who don't care about the art. Is it? He pulled into the driveway, parked, killed the engine, and finally turned to look at her directly. Dim streetlight cutting half her face into shadow. Because it feels like your parents are running a play, and it feels like you're letting them. Her eyes filled. For a second his resolve wavered. Some old muscle memory of 6 years telling him to reach over them, to soften them, to smooth this the way he'd smoothed 100 smaller fights. He didn't. You don't understand what it's like, she said, voice cracking. Being a Carter, being the only daughter. When Dad dies, I'm supposed to carry the legacy, make him proud. Supposed to what? He cut in, his own restraint finally giving out at the edges. Marry someone from your tax bracket, have the right kind of kids, live the right kind of life in the right zip code. Have I been a disappointment since day one? That's not fair, isn't it? Silence again, longer this time, thick enough to have its own weight in the car. Somewhere down the block a dog was barking at nothing, the sound carrying strange and hollow through the cold. Neither of them reached for the door handle, which felt, in its own small way, like a decision too, staying inside a parked car in the dark, rather than walking into a house that didn't feel like theirs. Anymore, not for one more minute than necessary. They went inside. She followed him through the door into a house that felt less like a home with every step. He stopped in the front hallway, turned to face her fully. Your mother had a very interesting conversation with you, in that hospital room. A conversation I happened to overhear. The color drained out of her face so fast it looked almost medical. What? I was outside. He watched every micro-expression cross her face, cataloging them the way he'd catalog a fault in a circuit board. I heard everything. I heard her call me pedestrian. I heard her say I wasn't good enough, that you married down, that I'm just waiting on your inheritance. I heard her suggest you divorce me before your father dies so things don't get complicated. And you know what I didn't hear? I didn't hear you defend me. Not really. I heard you say you didn't know anymore. Vanessa sank onto the couch like something had cut the string holding her upright, hands over her face, shoulders shaking. Darnell, 6 years, he said quietly, standing over her, watching her come apart in real time. I thought we were partners. I thought we were building something worth fighting for. But I was building a marriage, and you were what? Slumming it? Rebelling against your parents until it got inconvenient? That's not true. She looked up, mascara already running. I love you, I do, but do you respect me? He asked. The question he'd been circling for 2 weeks finally let loose. Do you see me as an equal? Or am I just the guy who wasn't quite good enough, but you settled for because I was safe and made you feel like something other than another rich girl? I never said that. You didn't have to. He sat down across from her, exhausted, the adrenaline of the whole night finally draining out and leaving him hollow. The Austin job. Tell me honestly, no more games. Is this about your career, or is this about giving your family the distance they want? She was silent a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper, honest in a way it hadn't been in months. My mom thinks we made a mistake, getting married so young, from such different worlds. She thinks if Dad dies while we're still together, it complicates the estate, the succession, the company. And what do you think? I think I'm confused. She wiped at her eyes, smearing the mascara worse. I think I love you, but I also think maybe she has a point. We are from different worlds. Darnell. We always were. Maybe that worked when everything was new, when Lincoln Park felt like an adventure. But now I look at my friends, the lives they have, and sometimes I wonder if we're just delaying something that's already decided. The honesty hurt worse than he'd expected, a blade sliding between ribs with the precision of something practiced. But at least it was honest. At least they were past the performance now. So the Austin job, he said flatly, is real. Something your father actually created because he thinks you have talent. She met his eyes. But yes, my mom suggested it as a way to create space. To let us figure out what we actually want without the daily pressure of pretending everything's fine when it isn't, while conveniently putting me in a different state where I'd have no home court advantage if this ends in a courtroom. Her silence was answer enough. She didn't deny it. Couldn't, because it was obviously, unbearably true. I need to think, he said, standing. I'm going to stay somewhere else tonight. Maybe a few nights. Darnell, please. I'm not angry, he said, and realized, saying it, that it was true, devastated, betrayed in a slow, cumulative way that didn't have a single moment he could point to. But not angry, not yet. I just need space to figure out what I want from all of this. He packed a bag while she cried on the couch, her scotch-colored dress wrinkled now, her perfect hair falling loose around a face that looked, for the first time in months, entirely human. He kissed the top of her head on his way out, a gesture that felt more like an ending than a good night, and drove to the Hampton Inn near the office. The kind of place that charges by the night and doesn't ask why. Sitting on the generic bedspread in the generic room, he called Jonathan. They made their move, Darnell said, no preamble. Texas job offer, vice president, $250,000, starts in 6 weeks, relocation required. Jonathan whistled low. They're not subtle. What do you want to do? First, you get everything in writing. Emails about the offer, the timeline, the comp package. Second, you start documenting your contributions to the marriage, every bill, every improvement to the house, every financial sacrifice you've made. Third, Jonathan paused and Darnell could hear paper shifting somewhere on the other end. Third, you decide if you're willing to fight. Really fight. Because this is going to get ugly. These people have money and lawyers, and they're not letting go of their daughter's inheritance without a war. I'm willing to fight, Darnell said, the words coming out steadier than he felt. I just need to know what I'm fighting for. Here's what I'm thinking. Jonathan's voice sharpened into something more clinical. That prenup's vulnerable. No independent counsel for you, that's a red flag courts don't like. Incomplete disclosure of her assets, another problem. And if they're relocating her specifically to manufacture grounds for divorce, that's strong evidence of bad faith. Can we use that? Absolutely. But Darnell Court is ugly, expensive, public. Your name goes into legal filings. Reporters love a story like this. Wealthy family, working engineer. Are you ready for that? Can you afford it? He thought about his savings. $60,000, built one careful paycheck at a time. Thought about 2 weeks of lies and calculations and feeling like a fool inside his own marriage. I'll find a way, he said. Over the next 3 days, he became meticulous in a way that would have made his old engineering professors proud. Forwarded himself every email about the Austin offer, building a digital paper trail nobody could argue with later. Documented every dollar he'd put into their joint life, $380,000 across 6 years. Half the down payment he'd thought was shared but legally wasn't. Photographed the deck he'd built by hand one brutal July. The backsplash he'd tiled square by square on a Saturday she'd been at a gallery opening. The garden he'd kept alive for 5 years through Chicago winters that killed everything else on the block. He also went deeper into Carter development than he'd gone the first time, using every trick a decade of reading blueprints and permits had taught him. Public filings, county records, court dockets nobody thinks to check unless they're already looking for something specific. What he found made his stomach knot in a new way, a different kind of dread than the personal betrayal, this one colder, more procedural. The company had taken out loans that didn't match a business supposedly thriving, permits filed for developments that had quietly stalled mid-construction. At least 4 subcontractors with pending lawsuits, unpaid invoices stacking up in court filings anyone could pull for the cost of a records request. The Carter fortune wasn't as stable as the dinner table conversation had made it sound. Might not be much of a fortune at all. Thursday, Vanessa called him for the 3rd time that day. Can we talk? Face to face. They met at a coffee shop near the house, neutral ground, the kind of chain with generic furniture and prices that made no sense for the quality. She looked wrecked. No makeup, hair in a messy knot, jeans and a sweatshirt instead of anything designer. Younger, somehow, closer to the girl he'd fallen for at that gala 7 years ago than she'd looked in months. I've been thinking, she said, stirring a latte she never drank. About everything, about us. I don't want to lose you. She looked up, eyes red, swollen. I know I've been terrible. I let my mom get in my head. Let her make me doubt what we have. But I do love you, Darnell. That was never a lie. But there was always a but. There had to be. I'm also being offered a real opportunity, she continued. Something that could change my career. And I don't want to have to choose between that and my marriage. I don't want those to be mutually exclusive. That's not what this is about, Vanessa. You know that. Maybe, she admitted, twisting her wedding ring around her finger, around and around, a nervous he'd never once noticed until this exact week. Probably. My mom's definitely manipulating the situation. But what if I took the job anyway? What if we made it work despite what she wants? Long distance, until you found something down there. You're a great engineer. You could get hired anywhere. Did your mom tell you to say this? He asked quietly. Vanessa flinched like he'd struck her. No, this is me, just me, okay? He leaned back, then answer honestly. If I told you taking this job ends us, that I need you to choose Austin or this marriage, what would you pick? She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. The silence stretched out between them, heavy enough to feel physically a fifth presence at the small table. I don't know. I honestly don't know, Darnell, and there it was. The truth, finally, after 6 years, after everything, faced with choosing between him and a job her mother had engineered specifically to separate them, she genuinely didn't know which way she'd fall. I need to tell you something, he said, voice steady. I've hired a lawyer. She went very still, latte forgotten, face pale in the fluorescent cafe light. What? A divorce attorney, Jonathan Wright. You remember him, my college roommate. To review the prenup, advise me on my options, protect my interests. Darnell, you can't be serious. We're not getting divorced. This is a rough patch, isn't it? He kept his voice gentle, not accusatory, though something underneath it had gone very hard and stayed that way. Your family's made it clear I'm not welcome in their world, that I never was and never will be them. And you've spent 2 weeks proving them right by not standing up to them, by considering a job you know was built to end this marriage. So yes, I hired a lawyer to protect myself from getting completely wiped out. From me, she said, and sounded genuinely hurt by it, which almost made him want to take it back. From a situation where everyone else has attorneys and strategies, and I'm the only one still operating on good faith like an idiot. He reached across the table, took her hand, felt it cold and trembling under his. I love you, probably always will. But I'm not going to be the fool who gets crushed because he loved too hard to see what was happening around him. She pulled her hand back like his touch had burned her. So what happens now? Now you decide what you want, he said, standing, leaving his own untouched coffee going cold on the table. The Austin job or this marriage. Your mother's approval or building something real with me, based on honesty instead of whatever we've been living in. You can't have both anymore. Those days are over. That's not a fair choice. Life isn't fair, he said, and left her sitting there, knowing he'd just forced the biggest decision of her life onto a Thursday afternoon in a mediocre coffee shop, and that they'd been heading toward this exact moment since the day he stood frozen outside room 412 with a bouquet of wilting flowers in his hand. His phone rang before he'd even made it to the car. Not Jonathan, Victor, Vanessa's younger brother, the quieter one, the one who usually lets Cedric do the talking at family things. Hey, Victor said, sounding like a man who'd rehearsed the opening and still wasn't sure about it. Vanessa called me. Said you two are having a rough time. We are. Look, I'm not calling to get in the middle of it. Just my mom's been different since Dad got sick. Meaner, almost. Like she's trying to control everything because there's nothing left she can actually control. Doesn't excuse anything. Just context, maybe. I appreciate the context, Darnell said, and meant it more than he expected to. She's scared, man. Victor's voice dropped lower, less rehearsed now. She won't say it like that, but that's what it is. Everybody in this family is scared and nobody's saying the actual word out loud, so it just comes out sideways. As money talk, as legacy talk. Easier than saying the word scared at a dinner table. Darnell sat with that a second, turning it over. Doesn't mean it isn't also cruel. Yeah, Victor said quiet. Both things can be true at once. That's kind of the whole family, honestly. They hung up without either of them fully resolving anything. Which felt, in its own way, like the most honest phone call he'd had all week. The real call came through 2 minutes later, right as he reached the car door. Jonathan. Darnell, get to my office now. Jonathan's voice had a pitch to it Darnell had never heard before, urgent, almost electric. I found something. Something big. Something that changes everything. Jonathan's office was crowded when Darnell arrived 20 minutes later, heart hammering somewhere between dread and something that felt uncomfortably close to hope. Two people he didn't recognize sat at the conference table. A woman in a sharp business suit who looked like she processed corporate deceit for breakfast and asked for seconds. A younger man with wire-rimmed glasses already typing on a laptop, fingers moving fast enough to look like a single blur. "Darnell, this is Kathleen Robinson, forensic accountant." Jonathan made the introductions quickly, gesturing to the woman who stood to shake Darnell's hand with a grip firm enough to leave an impression. "And Brandon Scott, financial investigator, sit down. Trust me, you're going to want to be sitting for this." Darnell sat, palms already sweating despite the air conditioning. "What did you find?" Kathleen opened a folder thick enough to double as a weapon, spreading pages across the table with the precision of someone laying out evidence at trial: numbers, charts, bank statements, documents stamped with Carter Development letterhead. "Your father-in-law's company." Her voice, crisp, entirely professional. "After you mentioned they seemed unusually anxious about protecting assets, we started pulling public records. County filing, court dockets, UCC liens, the sort of thing most people don't know how to find or don't bother looking for. What we found is not good for them. Catastrophic, actually." "How bad?" Darnell asked, though some part of him already suspected he didn't want the answer. "Carter Development's been hemorrhaging money for 3 years, Kathleen said, tapping a chart showing a line dropping steadily toward the bottom of the page. "Harold made some aggressive expansion moves right before the diagnosis. Miami, Denver development projects in Nashville and Milwaukee that needed serious capital. Then he got sick and everything started falling apart at once." Brandon jumped in, fingers still flying across the keyboard, pulling up spreadsheets dense enough to make Darnell's engineering-trained eyes swim a little. $12 million in loans to finance those expansions. They've been servicing the debt by quietly liquidating other assets, selling property, cashing investments, drawing down credit. But they're running out of things left to sell. "How bad?" Darnell asked again, because the first answer hadn't been specific enough to sit with. "As of last month," Kathleen said, meeting his eyes with something that looked almost like sympathy, though satisfaction sat right underneath it. "The company's roughly $6 million in the hole once you weigh liabilities against liquid assets. That $47 million figure your mother-in-law likes to quote, it's all based on real estate they can't sell without collapsing ongoing operations. It's smoke. A house of cards may be 3 months from coming down completely." Darnell felt the room tilt slightly, though nothing had physically moved. "So Vanessa's inheritance isn't what they've been telling her, or more accurately, Jonathan said, leaning back, not what it will be if they keep bleeding money at this rate. In 2 years, maybe less, Carter Development could be fully insolvent. She won't be inheriting millions, she'll be inheriting debt, massive debt, legal exposure, possibly personal liability if a bankruptcy court decides to pierce the corporate veil." "Which explains everything," Darnell said slowly, his mind stitching pieces together the way it stitched together a fault in a bad circuit. Deborah's urgency, the prenup, the Austin job. They're not protecting a fortune. They're protecting themselves from a financial collapse, making sure that when it hits, Vanessa isn't dragged down with it. And they definitely don't want you anywhere near the wreckage when it lands," Kathleen added. Darnell stood there a beat longer than the silence needed, running the whole shape of it backward, checking for a flaw in the logic the way he'd check a load calculation twice before signing off on it. He couldn't find one. Every piece fit. That was almost the worst part, not the betrayal itself, but how cleanly it all made sense once you had the missing numbers. Darnell stood, paced the small conference room, mind running through scenarios that kept rearranging themselves into the same ugly shape, no matter which order he tried them in. Deborah's hostility wasn't only about class, though that was clearly part of it. It was about protecting her daughter from a business failure that could ruin her entire adult life, the rushed timeline, the relocation designed to create distance fast, the prenup she'd insisted on 6 years ago before any of this had even started going wrong. Not about keeping Darnell from wealth, about keeping Darnell from becoming collateral damage and keeping Vanessa from becoming collateral damage too, if he stayed close enough to share in the fallout. "What about her trust fund?" Darnell asked, remembering the $8 million figure from that midnight laptop search 2 weeks ago. "That's separate from the company. That's real money." Kathleen's smile went grim, the expression of someone about to land the final blow. "That's the other piece of news for you. Trust funds in Illinois count as separate property in a divorce, unless they've been commingled with marital assets in a significant way. And you're a co-signer on the joint accounts, which means we could legally pull 6 years of statements. You pulled her trust records, Darnell asked, startled. We pulled what you already had legal access to, Jonathan said carefully. The point is that trust has been paying your mortgage, your property taxes, your renovations, your car insurance, basically your whole shared life for 6 years. Every time money moved from that trust into your life together, it became marital property under Illinois law. The trust isn't separate anymore. It's thoroughly, legally tangled with your marriage. Wait, Darnell said. Slow down. You're telling me the same money that made her family look untouchable is the exact same money that makes their protection worthless? Basically, yes, Kathleen said. It's also most elegant if you like that kind of irony. The more they used her money to build your life together, the less separate that money legally stayed. They built the trap and then walked their own daughter's fortune straight into it. So the prenup, Darnell said, is worthless. Effectively unenforceable, Jonathan confirmed, not bothering to hide his satisfaction. Designed to protect assets that either don't exist anymore or have been so thoroughly mixed with your marital estate that no court could cleanly separate them. A decent lawyer could take this document apart in an afternoon. I'm a very good lawyer. There's more, Brandon said, turning his laptop screen so Darnell could see it. Harold made Vanessa a signatory on several company accounts 3 years ago. Might have been for estate planning, might have been to make the succession look official, but it means she's legally exposed to company debt if the business fails. When it fails, she could be personally on the hook for millions contractor payments, loan guarantees, investor commitments. Darnell's mind kept turning, connecting threads, seeing the whole shape of it finally, clear and cold. So Deborah isn't trying to protect Vanessa's inheritance. She's trying to protect Vanessa from inheriting a catastrophe and making sure I'm nowhere near it, legally, when it all comes down. Yes, Jonathan said. If they get her divorced before Harold dies, your name's clean out of this mess. You can't claim against the trust. Can't be held liable for company debt. You just disappear from the paperwork entirely. But if I'm still married when Harold dies and the company collapses, Darnell said, finishing the thought himself, I become a target too, because marital assets can be pursued to cover business debt. They could come after everything we own together to satisfy Carter Development's obligations. Exactly right, Kathleen confirmed. You're a lot sharper than they've given you credit for. Darnell stood there a long moment, the whole shape of the last 2 weeks finally settling into something he could actually see, edge to edge. Not class prejudice, though that was real too. Not simple cruelty. A family in a slow-motion collapse, trying to save their own daughter from the wreckage by any means available, including sacrificing him to do it. What are my options? He asked, turning to face Jonathan directly, the question landing heavier in the room than he expected it to. Jonathan ticked them off, lawyer style, on 3 fingers. 1. File now. Challenge the prenup aggressively. Fight for equitable distribution before everything implodes. You could walk away with close to half of what's in that trust. 2. Stay married. Hope against every piece of evidence in front of us that the company somehow recovers. Risk getting dragged into the collapse. Lose everything you've built. 3. Negotiate. Darnell finished. Negotiate what, though, was the real question. And Jonathan let it hang there a second before answering it himself. Leverage. You know something they don't think you know. You know their empire's crumbling. You know Vanessa's being positioned to inherit a disaster instead of a fortune. You know that prenup's tissue paper. That's real power, Darnell. The question is what you actually want to do with it. Darnell thought about Vanessa crying in that coffee shop a few hours earlier. Mascara running. Hands shaking around a cup she never drank from. The ring on her finger catching the fluorescent light every time she turned it. Thought about 6 years built on assumptions that had turned out to be quietly, catastrophically wrong. Thought about loving someone who'd apparently kept 1 foot near the exit the entire time without either of them fully admitting it. Not even to themselves. Not even at 3 in the morning when admitting things is supposed to be easiest. I want the truth out, Darnell said finally. The words surprising him even as they left his mouth, landing strange in his own ears. Like a sentence spoken in a voice he hadn't used before and wasn't entirely sure yet belonged to him. I want her to know what her parents are actually protecting her from, what they've been hiding. And I want he stopped, startled by what he was about to say next. I want her to have a real choice, based on what's actually true, not lies, not management. Jonathan raised an eyebrow, genuinely thrown, pen stopping mid-note like the sentence had physically interrupted him. You want to help her, after everything they've put you through. After 6 years of being treated like you don't belong in the same room as them. I want to give her something her parents never did, Darnell said. Respect. The whole truth, even the ugly parts. Can we do that? Show her everything without it turning into some kind of legal landmine. We can, Jonathan said slowly, thinking it through in real time. But Darnell understands something. If you show her what's really happening, she might use it to protect herself in ways that don't include you. She could take everything we've built here, hire her own attorney, and cut you out entirely. You could end up being the man who handed his own wife the exact tools to walk away clean. Is that a risk you're actually willing to take? I'd rather have nothing built on the truth than something built on lies, Darnell said, and meant it with everything left in him, every last reserve of it, scraped from a tank that had felt close to empty for 2 straight weeks now. Over the following 2 days, Kathleen and Brandon assembled a report that looked like something federal regulators would produce. The full financial deterioration of Carter Development laid bare, projections showing likely insolvency within 18 months, documentation of Vanessa's legal exposure as a signatory nobody had fully explained to her. Darnell added what he had. The recording from the hospital hallway, the Austin emails with their suspiciously tight timeline, proof the trust fund had been thoroughly, irreversibly commingled with 6 years of shared life. All of it organized, sourced, undeniable. Sunday afternoon he sat alone in the Hampton Inn room with the report closed on the desk in front of him, unable to stop opening it and closing it again, like checking a wound to see if it had actually stopped bleeding. Because what if she took the money and ran anyway? What if the truth didn't change anything, just gave her better information to leave with? What if he handed her the exit and she used it exactly the way Jonathan warned he might? Which would mean 6 years, 3 hours of forensic accounting, and 1 very good lawyer's afternoon, all spent building the weapon that finally, cleanly ended him. He almost didn't call, sat with the phone in his hand for 20 full minutes, thumb hovering over her contact photo wedding day, her laughing, that same photo that used to make him smile and now mostly just made his chest hurt in a specific, located way, like pressing a bruise to check if it's still there, But then he thought about his father again, about a register closed out at midnight, about numbers that didn't lie even when everything else in the world did. And he thought, if this is the last honest thing I ever do in this marriage, let it actually be honest. Let it not be a trick dressed up as honesty, the way everything at that dinner table had been a trick dressed up as concern. So he called. Sunday evening, the day before her supposed deadline to accept or decline the Austin position, Darnell called his wife. Can you come to Jonathan Wright's office tomorrow morning? He asked. No preamble. 10 a.m. There's something you need to see. Something important. Darnell, I don't think meeting with lawyers is going to fix us. It's not about divorce, he cut in. It's about your family. About what they haven't told you. Silence on the line, long enough he could hear her breathing shift, something in her posture changing even through the phone. Okay, she said finally. I'll be there. 10. Monday morning arrived cold and gray, typical December light flattening the whole city into shades of the same color. Vanessa showed up at Jonathan's office at 9:58, punctual as always even in the middle of falling apart, wearing a designer suit like armor against whatever she expected to walk into. Her expression shifted the second she saw the room, not just Darnell and Jonathan, but Kathleen and Brandon too. All of them waiting like this was some kind of intervention nobody had warned her about. What is this? She asked, stopping dead in the doorway. Darnell, what's going on? He didn't answer right away. Because there wasn't a version of the answer that fit in a doorway, that fit in the 3 seconds before she'd have to decide whether to sit down or turn around and leave. Everything he'd built over 2 weeks, the recordings, the deed printout folded into quarters in his glove compartment, Kathleen's charts, Brandon's spreadsheets, the whole architecture of a truth nobody in her family had trusted her enough to hand her straight. All of it was sitting on a conference table 6 feet away, waiting on whether she'd come the rest of the way into the room. Sit down, he said finally, please. This is important. Maybe the most important thing anyone's ever going to tell you. She didn't move at first. Stood there in the doorway in her armor of a suit, eyes flicking from face to face like she was doing the same math he'd done 2 weeks ago outside a hospital door, trying to calculate, in real time, exactly how much her whole life was about to change before anyone said another word. Now let me add a full dramatized Deborah confrontation scene. Now let me expand the therapy scene and funeral swill scenes. Need about 1,300, 1,500 more. Let me expand the Mustang scenes and add a specific baby moment. Need about 1,300 more. Let me add a specific baby scene and expand the ending. Need about 901,100 more. Let me expand the closing section and add one more scene. Need about 900 more. Let me add depth to the I want you to have agency scene and expand the closing paragraph. Need about 900 more. Let me expand the closing coda substantially. Need about 800 more words. Need about 500 more words. Need about 400 more words. Need about 300 more words. Need about 200 more words. Need about 180 more words. Need about 130 more, 6,800 words exactly. Now outputting the full text, because there was no version of this where he got to explain first. Because explaining first would have sounded like a setup, like a lawyer's opening statement. And he needed her to arrive at the truth on her own timeline, not his, which meant standing there, waiting, letting the silence do work no sentence of his ever could. She sat, finally, chair scraping against tile loud enough that Brandon flinched at his laptop, and Vanessa reached for the folder like it might bite her, which, in a way, it was about to. Before you open that, Darnell said, I want you to know something. I love you. I have this whole time, even when loving you hurt like hell. And what I'm about to show you isn't revenge. It isn't a trick. It's the truth. The truth I think you've earned. Before you make any more decisions about Austin, about us, about your family, She opened it. The first page hit her like something physical. He watched her shoulders drop half an inch, watched the color leave her face in a slow tide instead of all at once. Financial statements, debt schedules, the words insolvency projection sitting there in 12-point font like they belonged in someone else's life. This can't be right, she whispered. The company's worth $47 million. My dad said on paper, Kathleen said gently. Based on real estate valuations. In reality, the company's drowning in debt your father took on to finance expansion projects that failed. Your mother's been quietly selling assets to keep it afloat and keep up appearances, while telling you you're protecting a fortune that doesn't exist anymore. Vanessa's hands were shaking now, flipping page after page. Debt schedules, liquidation records, contractor liens, pending lawsuits nobody in that Lake Forest dining room had ever mentioned over the Wellington and the wine. This can't be right. She said again, quieter. Like saying it twice might make it truer. You investigated my family. She said. Looking up at Darnell. Eyes wide. Something between betrayal and disbelief moving fast across her face. You hired forensic accountants to dig into my father's business. I protected myself, Darnell said, refusing to feel the guilt trying to climb up his throat. After I heard your mother tell you I wasn't good enough, that I was calculating, manipulative, that you should divorce me before your father dies to avoid complications. I hired a lawyer to review a document I signed without understanding what it actually meant. And in the process we found this. We found the truth about what's actually happening. He slid another paper across the table. Her trust fund statement, Kathleen's annotations circling every payment. Your trust been paying for our life together for 6 years, Darnell said, watching her face while she processed it. The mortgage, the renovations, the car insurance. Everything. Under Illinois law, that makes it marital property, not separate. The prenup your parents had me sign, it's worthless, not because of any trick on my part, because they mixed your money with our marriage so completely it can't be untangled anymore. So you could take my money, Vanessa said, voice hollow now, distant. That's what this is. You're going to divorce me and take half of everything. I could, Darnell said, not softening it. If I wanted to, if I was the person your mother thinks I am. But that's not why I'm showing you this. That's not what this meeting is about. He pulled out the last document, the one about her legal exposure as a company signatory, complete with projections of personal liability if Carter Development went under. This is why your mother really wants you divorced before your father dies, Darnell said, watching comprehension land on her face in slow motion. Not to protect your inheritance from me, to protect you from inheriting a catastrophe. If Carter Development collapses while you're still a signatory, and while you're still married to me, both of us could be personally liable for company obligations, millions in debt. Your mother isn't trying to keep me from stealing your fortune, Vanessa. She's trying to make sure I can't drag you down when everything falls apart, and trying to make sure you're not financially destroyed when your father's empire crumbles. Vanessa stared at the documents, tears streaming now, ruining what was left of her makeup. They lied to me about everything, about the company, about the inheritance. Why didn't they just tell me the truth? They were trying to protect you, Darnell said, and was surprised, hearing himself, to find he actually meant it despite everything, in their own dysfunctional, controlling way. They just didn't respect you enough to tell you the truth straight. They treated you like a child who needed managing, instead of an adult who could handle her own reality, and you did, she said, looking up at him, face a mess of confusion and pain and something else he couldn't fully name yet, You're giving me the truth. What do you actually want from all this, Darnell? What's your angle? He'd thought about this question for 2 weeks straight, awake in hotel rooms, sitting in Jonathan's office, driving around Chicago at night with nowhere he actually wanted to go, He'd imagined confronting her with evidence, demanding his fair share, fighting in court, proving the working-class husband was smarter than the family that had never respected him, But sitting across from her now, watching her whole world come apart in real time, he found he wanted something simpler and infinitely more complicated. I want you to have agency, he said, real agency, to make your own choices about your life without your parents pulling strings, or me manipulating you, or anyone treating you like you can't handle reality. If you want the Austin job, take it, If you want to help save your family's company even knowing how bad it is, do it. If you want to divorce me because you genuinely think we're wrong for each other, I'll respect that and we'll work out something fair. But don't do any of it because your mother made you feel like you have to. And what about you, she asked. What do you get out of giving me this, My self-respect, Darnell said, the answer coming easier than he expected, knowing I was honest when everyone else around me was playing a game. That's it? Just self-respect? Not just, he said. Just is doing a lot of work in that sentence and you know it. Self-respect is the whole thing, Vanessa, It's the only thing nobody in your family could ever take from me, because it was never for sale to begin with. She stared at him a long second, something shifting behind her eyes. That I treated you like an equal capable of making informed decisions even when your own family wouldn't, And maybe, if we're both very lucky and we both actually want it, a chance to rebuild something real instead of the illusion we've been living inside, Vanessa was quiet a long time, staring at the papers like pieces of a puzzle finally clicking into a shape she couldn't unsee now. Financial statements showing her family's decline, trust records showing years of quiet commingling, legal analysis showing exactly how exposed she'd been left without ever being told. Finally, she looked at Jonathan, something new in her face. Determination, mostly, with a current of controlled anger running underneath it. Is all of this admissible in court, she asked. If I wanted to challenge my parents' control of the company, protect myself legally, it's mostly public record, Jonathan said carefully. Tax filings, loan documents, corporate records, Anyone could find it if they knew where to look and had the resources to put it together properly. But that's a question for a different kind of attorney. Someone who handles business litigation. I know a few good ones if you want them. You really didn't have to tell me any of this, Vanessa said, looking at Darnell now, really looking, maybe for the first time in months, You could have used all of it against me, destroyed me in divorce court, taken half my trust fund and walked away clean while my family fell apart around me. Yes, I could have, Darnell agreed. But that's not who I am, and more importantly, that's not who I want to be. Say that again, shed quiet. Darnell blinked. Say what? That's not who I want to be, She was crying again, but differently now, something loosening instead of breaking. I think I need to hear you say who you want to be, out loud. Because nobody in my whole life has ever once said that sentence to me like it was a choice instead of an accident. I've been awful to you, Vanessa whispered, tears flowing freely now. I let them make me doubt you, doubt us, doubt everything we built. I'm sorry, Darnell. I'm so incredibly sorry, and I know sorry doesn't rebuild 6 years by itself, but it's what I have to start with, So I'm starting with it. She reached across the table, took both his hands in hers, gripping tight like she was afraid he might vanish if she loosened her hold even a little. The Austin turning it down. Vanessa, you don't have to, Not because of you, She cut in, firm now, Something steadying in her voice that hadn't been there in weeks, Not because of them. Not because I'm scared or trying to save our marriage or any of that. I'm turning it down because I'm done letting other people make my decisions for me. I'm going to talk to my father, really talk. About the company, about the debt, about all of it. I'm hiring my own attorney to get my name off those accounts and protect myself from the bankruptcy. And then I'm going to figure out what I actually want to do with my life, on my own terms, for the first time ever. Darnell felt something shift in his chest, loosening after weeks of sitting there tight and aching. This was the woman he'd married. Strong, independent, capable of hard decisions. She'd been buried under her parents' expectations so long he'd almost forgotten she still existed underneath all that weight. What about us? He asked quietly, afraid of the answer but needing it anyway. I don't know yet, Vanessa said honestly. And somehow that honesty landed better than any false promise could have. I need time to process all of this. To figure out who I am without their voices in my head, without the money and the expectations and the lies. To understand what I actually want, from life, from marriage, from everything. Can you give me that? He almost said something reflexive, some old reassurance about how he'd wait forever if he had to, and stopped himself. Because forever wasn't a promise either of them could actually afford to make right now. Not. Honestly, not after everything that had just happened in this room. It's okay, Darnell said, and meant it, even though some smaller, more selfish part of him didn't, not entirely, not yet, take whatever time you need, They left Jonathan's office together but drove separately, both needing space to sit with everything alone, The whole architecture of a marriage rebuilt or ended sitting somewhere in the space between two separate cars idling at the same red light, neither one looking over at the other. Darnell went back to the Hampton Inn and sat on the bed, feeling strange and unmoored, like a man who'd finally played his whole hand and had nothing left to do but watch the table. Vanessa drove to Lake Forest alone the following week, though she called Darnell from the car afterward, still shaking, and told him everything almost word for word, like she needed to say it out loud twice to make it feel real. Deborah had answered the door already knowing why she'd come. Vanessa could tell from the way her mother's face arranged itself before a single word passed between them. The practiced calm of a woman who'd spent her whole life controlling the first 3 seconds of any conversation. I know everything, Vanessa said, standing in the doorway, refusing the offer to come in and sit, refusing the tea Deborah had already started toward the kitchen to make. The debt, the trust, the fact that you were engineering my divorce to protect me from a disaster you never once had the decency to actually explain. Deborah's face didn't crack, not right away. I did what a mother does. You lied to me, Mom, for months, maybe longer. I protected you. You controlled me, Vanessa said, voice rising despite every effort to keep it level. There's a difference. And I think somewhere underneath everything you know that. You could have sat me down and told me the truth. Instead, you tried to engineer my whole life around a secret, and you were willing to destroy my marriage to do it. And there was a long silence. Long enough that a car passed on the street behind them, ordinary and oblivious, headlights sweeping briefly across Deborah's face and showing, for just a second, something underneath the composure that looked almost like fear. I would do it again, Deborah finally said, and her voice cracked doing it, the first real crack Vanessa had heard in it in years, because a mother protects her child however she has to. I watched your father build something out of nothing and I watched it start dying in front of me and I was terrified, Vanessa. Terrified of losing him and terrified of you losing everything at the same time. And I didn't know how to hold both of those things without breaking. So I did what I know how to do. I controlled what I could control. That's not love, Mom. That's fear wearing love's clothes. Maybe, Deborah said. Maybe it's both. I don't know anymore which one I've been doing for 32 years. Vanessa left without resolving it. Because some things don't resolve in a single doorway conversation no matter how badly you want them to. But something had shifted. Some old architecture cracking just slightly enough that months later, after everything else had already happened, there'd be room for something smaller and more honest to grow back in its place. 3 days after the confrontation, Vanessa called Darnell. Can you come to the house, our house? I want to talk. He found her in the kitchen surrounded by documents, printouts of the financial analysis, legal pads covered in notes, sections highlighted and circled and cross-referenced like she'd been working through it methodically for hours, asking herself the same questions over and over until she'd landed on answers. I confronted my father yesterday, she said, not looking up from the papers. Showed him everything you gave me. Do you know what he said? What, thank God someone finally told you the truth. She laughed, but it came out bitter, sharp-edged. He didn't even try to deny it. Just said my mother insisted on keeping me in the dark to protect me. Like I'm a child who can't handle reality. Like I'm too fragile or too stupid to know the family business is falling apart. What did your mother say? Already told you, Vanessa said, quieter now. Went to see her myself few days back. Told her I know everything. She didn't deny it. Just said she'd do it again. Which I don't even know what to do with that, Darnell. Is that love? Is that just control wearing love's clothes? I genuinely can't tell anymore. Maybe it's both, Darnell said, thinking of something Victor had said on the phone days earlier. Maybe that's the whole family, honestly. Vanessa pushed a document across the table, a new agreement, professionally drafted, thick with legal language he recognized the shape of even before reading it. I had an attorney draft this, she said. It's a postnuptial agreement that actually treats you fairly. Community property, shared assets, equitable division if we ever did split, real partnership, based on equality, not on my family's money and control. You don't have to do this right now, he said. Yes, I do. She interrupted, firm. Not because I think we're getting divorced. Not because I feel guilty, though I do feel guilty. Because it was signed under false pretenses. Because you deserved independent counsel and didn't get it. Because my parents lied about our financial situation when they had you sign it. Because it's fundamentally unfair and represents everything wrong with how my family's treated you since day one. Why now? Darnell asked. Why this? Because you showed me the truth when you could have used it as a weapon, Vanessa said, meeting his eyes without flinching. Because you gave me agency when you could have controlled and destroyed me instead. Because you're a better person than anyone in my family ever gave you credit for, including me. And I hate that about myself. I hate that it took a financial catastrophe to see clearly what should have been obvious the whole time. I want us to work, Darnell said. I really do, but we need help. Real counseling with someone who understands families like yours and money like this and how badly both can wreck two people who actually love each other. I know, Vanessa said, squeezing his hand. I already found someone. Dr. Michelle Martin. She specializes in exactly what we need. First appointment's Thursday, 6 o'clock, if you'll come with me. I'll come, Darnell promised them. They sat in the kitchen holding hands across the table like they used to, back before any of this. Back when the biggest decision either of them made was which restaurant to try on a Friday night. And for the first time in weeks, maybe longer, Darnell felt like he was actually seeing his wife clearly. Not the fantasy version where love conquered everything without cost. Not the manipulated version her family kept trying to sculpt them. Just the real, complicated truth of who they were, and what they'd built, and what they might still become if they were brave enough to keep choosing it. Dr. Michelle Martin's office sat on the second floor of a converted brownstone in Hyde Park, plants crowding every windowsill. Two armchairs angled toward each other instead of toward a desk. First session, she didn't ask them to explain the whole marriage. Just asked one question and let it sit there in the room. What does trust actually feel like in your body, she asked. Not what it means, what it feels like physically. Where do you carry it? Darnell didn't have an answer ready, which told him something. My chest, Vanessa finally offered, when the silence went on long enough to become its own kind of answer. Or it used to. Now it's more like a held breath, like I'm always half-braced for the next thing to fall apart. And you, Darnell? Dr. Martin asked, turning to him without letting the moment cool. My hands, he said, surprising himself. When something's wrong, I feel it in my hands first. Like they're already reaching for a tool before my head's caught up to what's broken. That's a useful thing to know about yourself, Dr. Martin said, writing nothing down, just watching them both. Because trust isn't a feeling you wait for. It's something you rebuild with your hands, the same way you'd rebuild anything else that's broken. One deliberate motion at a time. Weeks folded into each other after that. Sessions on Thursdays, sometimes raw and slow, sometimes circling the same argument from 6 different angles until something in it finally cracked open. Vanessa hired a business litigation attorney, formally removed her name from every Carter development account she could legally exit, documented every step in case the bankruptcy court came looking for someone to blame later. She stopped taking Deborah's calls for a while, started again, cautiously, months later, with boundaries drawn thick and specific, no discussion of Darnell, no discussion of money, no unsolicited advice about her marriage or her future, because that's what it took apparently. Distance first. Then, maybe, something closer to peace. Harold's decline moved faster after the confrontation, like something in him had been holding on out of stubbornness alone, and had finally decided the fight wasn't worth it anymore. He died on a Tuesday morning in April. Family gathered around a hospital bed that looked almost identical to the one in room 412. The symmetry of it not lost on Darnell even through the grief. The funeral was small, tasteful, held at a church on the North Shore. Harold had apparently attended twice a year his whole adult life, Christmas and Easter, the kind of loose faith that mostly shows up as habit and nostalgia. Cedric gave the eulogy, voice cracking twice. describing a father who used to bring his kids to job sites on Saturday mornings and let them hold the blueprints like they mattered them, like the whole company had been built as much for them as for himself. Victor stood near the back the entire service, hands in his pockets, jaw tight, the particular stillness of a man determined not to be the one who broke down first. Darnell sat beside Vanessa, her hand gripping his through the whole thing, tense in a way that had nothing to do with grief. For a moment there, the tension was for what came after them, for the funeral's particular gravity of pulling every unresolved thing in a family up to the surface all at once, whether anyone was ready for it or not. Deborah barely spoke to Darnell or Vanessa the entire service, her face a mask of controlled grief and something colder underneath it, the particular fury of a woman watching her carefully constructed plan unravel in real time, at her own husband's funeral, in front of everyone she'd spent 30 years trying to impress. 3 weeks later, Raymond Harris's office, the will reading, Raymond, older now than the last time Darnell had sat across from him, signing away his own protections, adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat with the particular gravity of a man about to say something he'd been sitting on for a long time. Cedric and Victor sat along the far wall, present for the general reading but not named in the provision about to be announced, both of them leaning forward, slightly the way people do when they sense a room is about to shift. "There's a special provision," Raymond said. "Harold added it 18 months ago, right after the diagnosis, without telling Deborah." Vanessa went very still beside Darnell. Cedric glanced at Victor, some silent brother language passing between them that Darnell couldn't read but recognized the shape of anyway. "The house at 214 Sycamore Street," Raymond continued, "is left entirely to Vanessa, placed in a separate trust, unconnected to Carter Development, protected from any company creditors, regardless of what happens with the bankruptcy proceedings." Darnell didn't recognize the address. Watched Vanessa's face instead, watched something break open behind her eyes. "That's," she started, voice catching. "That's the house Dad grew up in. Before any of the money, before any of this, Cedric let out a breath that was half laugh, half something raw. The sound of a grown man being surprised by his own father one last time from beyond any reasonable expectation of it. That old man. 18 months, and he never said a word to any of us. Didn't say a word to Deborah either. Victor added, eyes still fixed somewhere on the carpet like the answer might be woven into it. Which tells you something about how much he trusted the rest of us to keep it quiet. Raymond slid an envelope carefully across the desk. "There's also a letter. He wanted you to have it privately, but he said you could read it in front of your husband if you chose to." Vanessa's hands shook opening it. Darnell read it over her shoulder, the two of them leaning into each other the way they used to before any of this started, before a 4-inch gap in a hospital door changed the entire shape of their lives. "Vanessa, my girl, I knew the company was going to collapse. Knew it long before I told anyone, including your mother. I made mistakes, big ones, and I didn't want you paying for them. So I did the one thing I could do alone, quietly, without your mother finding out and trying to control it the way she controls everything else. I left you the house I grew up in before there was money, before any of the things that ended up costing us so much more than they gave us. It isn't worth $47 million. It's worth more than that. It's where this family actually started, before we forgot what starting meant. I also want to say this, because I don't think I had the courage to say it while I was alive. Darnell is the best thing that ever walked into this family. Better than me. Certainly better than how your mother treated him. I'm sorry I didn't stand up for him more while I still could. Don't repeat my mistake. Don't let money, or the absence of it, decide who you love and who you trust. I love you more than any amount of money ever bought, Dad. Darnell felt something break loose in his own chest reading it. Not pain this time. Something closer to being finally, fully seen by a man he'd never been entirely sure was on his side. He read the last line twice. "I love you more than any amount of money ever bought." Simple words, the kind that don't need untangling the way a prenup does. The kind a dying man writes when he's finally run out of patience for anything but the plainest version of the truth. Darnell folded the letter carefully back along its original creases, handed it back to Vanessa, and understood, sitting there in Raymond's office with Cedric clearing his throat and Victor, staring hard at the carpet, that some inheritances never show up on any spreadsheet Kathleen or Brandon could have pulled. Some of them only arrive after the person who built them is already gone, tucked inside an envelope, waiting on somebody brave enough to open it in front of witnesses. Carter Development filed for bankruptcy 4 months after Harold's death, exactly the way Kathleen's projections had said it would. The company was liquidated. Assets sold to satisfy creditors. Employees let go. A name that had meant something in Chicago business circles for 40 years reduced in the trade papers to a cautionary footnote. Deborah had to sell most of what remained. The Lake Forest estate went first, then a vacation property downstate, then most of what had made her feel untouchable for 3 decades. Cedric took a job managing operations for a competitor within weeks, pride bruised but pragmatic about it. The kind of man who'd rather work under someone else's name than watch his father's legacy get picked apart in bankruptcy court from the sidelines. Victor took it harder. Disappeared for a while. Resurfaced eventually with a smaller consulting gig and a noticeably quieter way of talking about their mother. Like something in him had recalibrated for good. But the house on Sycamore Street, protected in a trust Harold had built alone in the last months of his life, stayed exactly where it was. Entirely Vanessa's. Vanessa grieved her father hard, harder than Darnell had expected, but felt something close to relief too. Underneath the grief, relief at not having to keep pretending a fortune existed that had already quietly died. She interviewed at 3 galleries before landing the curator position at Morrison Contemporary. And on her first day she called Darnell from the parking lot before even going in. Voice shaking with something that wasn't nerves exactly, closer to disbelief. Nobody in that building knows my last name means anything, she said. Nobody's going to look at me and think Carter money. They're going to look at me and think I don't even know. Just me, I guess. Just whatever I actually am without all of it attached. Go find out. Darnell told her. And she laughed. Actually laughed. A sound he hadn't heard from her in what felt like a very long time. Darnell kept his job at Sterling Power Systems, kept contributing to a household that finally felt like it belonged to both of them equally, kept building the career he'd chosen for himself a decade before any of this began. They sold the Lincoln Park house that had never legally been his. Moved into the one on Sycamore Street, smaller than Lake Forest by a wide margin, but warm in a way that mansion had never once managed to be. With a detached garage out back that Darnell walked into on his first afternoon there and stood in for a long time without saying anything at all. The 1967 Mustang Harold left him in the will a separate, smaller provision nobody had made a fuss over at the reading. Just a line item next to the house sat under a tarp in that garage, cherry red under the dust. A note clipped to the steering wheel in Harold's shaking handwriting. For Darnell, man who knows how to fix what's broken. He started on it weekends. Taught himself the mechanics his father had never had time to teach him, growing up behind a diner counter 12 hours a day instead of under the hood of a car. First Saturday, he didn't even know how to get the hood open without watching 4 different videos first. And Vanessa stood in the doorway laughing at him until he threatened to hand her the manual and make her figure it out instead. Second month in, they found a mouse nest in the glove compartment. Dried leaves and a chewed-up gas station receipt from some previous decade. And Vanessa screamed loud enough that a neighbor 2 houses down came out to check if everyone was all right. And they laughed about it for a week straight. The specific relief of a marriage that could still find something to laugh about after everything it had survived. Something ordinary and small and entirely unrelated to money or family or anything either of them had spent the last year fighting over. Some Saturdays Vanessa sat with him on an overturned crate, handing him tools whose names she was slowly learning, asking questions about compression and timing that had nothing to do with anything she'd ever studied at any gallery. Other Saturdays he taught her to change her own oil, patient in a way he hadn't known he had in him, watching her hands go from hesitant to sure. Over the course of an afternoon, the same transformation he'd watched happen to her whole life, since the day she walked into Jonathan's office not knowing what was waiting for her. Do you ever regret it? She asked one July afternoon. Both of them grease-streaked, sweating, a couple of beers sweating right alongside them on the concrete floor, not fighting harder for more in the divorce that never happened. You could have taken me for everything, back when you had the leverage, half the trust, spousal support, all of it. No, Darnell said simply, and meant it down to the floor of himself. Because this, he gestured at the garage, at the half-restored engine block, at the strange and complicated marriage they'd rebuilt out of wreckage. Neither of them had chosen this is real. And I'd rather have something real and honest than something expensive built on lies and resentment. Any day of my life. Vanessa leaned her head against his shoulder, and he could feel her smiling without having to look. I love you for real this time. Not the version I fell for at that gala, not the version my parents wanted to see, the actual complicated grease-stained you. Who chose honesty over revenge when revenge would have been so much easier to hold on to? I love you too, Darnell said, the same way. Not the Carter I thought I was marrying. The real woman brave enough to choose truth even when it cost her almost everything she'd been raised to protect. 6 months later, Vanessa was pregnant. Neither of them had planned it, but neither had they been careful about preventing it either, which felt, in its own quiet way, like an answer they'd both already agreed to without saying it out loud. When she told him over breakfast one Sunday morning, sunlight coming in low and gold through the kitchen window on Sycamore Street, they both cried. Different tears than any they'd cried in this house before. Something closer to relief, something closer to hope, finally allowed to exist without an asterisk attached to it. I took the test twice, she said, laughing through the tears, holding both little sticks up like evidence in a trial with only good news attached to it for once. Because I didn't trust the first one. Because some part of me is still learning how to trust good news without waiting for the catch. There's no catch, Darnell said, pulling her in, both of them still in pajamas in a kitchen that had never once felt staged. Not for one single morning since they'd moved in. Not with this, I promise you. Not with this. We're doing this differently, Vanessa said, hand on her still flat stomach. Our kid isn't growing up thinking money decides what a person's worth. Isn't learning to size people up by bank accounts or last names. No, Darnell agreed. They'll grow up knowing the things that actually matter: honesty, respect. Real love can't be bought or inherited. They have to be built, carefully, every single day. Sometimes with your bare hands in a garage that used to belong to a man who finally, right at the end, found the courage to do one honest thing. Deborah sent a card when the baby was born, a boy. They named him Jonathan Harold Cooper, after the friend who'd never once hesitated when Darnell called at midnight, and the father-in-law who'd found, right at the very end, the courage his whole life apparently hadn't given him room for until then. Deborah's card came with a check $50,000, tucked inside a note that read simply, for his education, from a grandmother who loves him. It wasn't an apology, not really. It was Deborah's version of one, which was, Darnell was learning, sometimes the only version people like her had access to. Vanessa cashed the check, put it straight into a college fund, accepted the gesture for exactly what it was: imperfect, but a start, which was more than they'd had at the beginning of any of this. The first time Darnell held his son, 3 hours old, red-faced and furious at the whole indignity of being born, he thought about a hospital hallway 2 years earlier, a 4-inch gap in a door, flowers already wilting in his hand before he'd even known what he was walking into. He thought about how strange it was that both the worst night of his life and the best one had happened inside hospital rooms almost identical to each other. Fluorescent light and antiseptic smell and machines beeping somewhere down the hall, and how the only real difference between them was who was standing in the room and what they were choosing to say to each other. "You're not going anywhere," he told the baby, quiet enough that only the baby and the machines could hear him say it. "Nobody's ever going to calculate what you're worth. Not while I'm around to stop it." Vanessa, exhausted, propped up against hospital pillows that felt nothing like the ones in room 412, despite the coincidence of the fabric, watched him say it and didn't ask what he meant. Didn't need to. Some things you just recognize when you hear them. The way you recognize a promise being made for the first time in a room that's finally actually safe enough to make one in. Life wasn't perfect after that. They still fought, occasionally, old patterns trying to claw their way back in at 3 in the morning when everyone's defenses run lowest. But they fought honestly now. With words instead of silence, dressed up as peace. With respect instead of the quiet, corrosive contempt that had almost ended everything before either of them fully understood what was happening to them. Deborah came to see the baby for the first time when he was 6 weeks old, standing awkwardly in the doorway of the Sycamore house the same way Vanessa had once stood in the doorway of Jonathan's office, unsure whether she'd be let. All the way in, Vanessa let her hold him. Watched her mother's face do something Vanessa hadn't seen in years. Maybe ever go soft. Entirely undefended. No calculation visible anywhere in it. Just a grandmother holding a baby like the baby was the only math left that actually mattered. "He's beautiful," Deborah said, voice thick. "You did good, sweetheart. Both of you." "Thank you, Mom," Vanessa said, and meant it, and didn't say anything else, because some apologies don't need to be accepted out loud to start counting. They just need somewhere to land, and a baby's small sleeping weight turned out to be exactly soft enough ground for one to finally land on. Darnell watched from the kitchen doorway, coffee in hand, and felt something in his chest that wasn't quite forgiveness and wasn't quite peace either, but was close enough to both that he decided not to name it more precisely than that. Some things worked better left a little undefined. Some healing didn't need a label to still be real. The Mustang's engine turned over for the first time that April, a full year after Harold's death. The sound of it catching and holding somewhere between a cough and a roar. Both of them stood there in the cold garage cheering like they'd won something bigger than a single ignition cycle. Vanessa's breath fogging in the unheated air. Darnell's hands still black to the wrist with grease he hadn't bothered wiping off before pulling her into a hug. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's choosing truth over deception, respect over control. Real love over comfortable lies that are so much easier to maintain right up until the moment they aren't. Darnell Cooper learned that the hard way standing outside a hospital room, listening to his own worth get calculated in dollars, finding out he'd been married to an illusion built by people who'd never once bothered to actually know him. But in losing the fantasy of what his marriage was supposed to look like, he gained something worth infinitely more. A partnership built on honesty, on equality, on the slow, difficult, unglamorous work of seeing someone clearly and choosing them anyway, over and over, on purpose, every single day. It would have been easier not to, because that's the part nobody ever tells you about surviving something like this. It isn't a single dramatic moment where the truth arrives and everything's fixed forever after. It's 1,000 small moments after that one, a Thursday therapy session, an oil change taught patiently in a cold garage, a check cashed and redirected towards something better than the hand that wrote it, a baby held under fluorescent light while a father makes a promise nobody else in the room needs explained, which is maybe the only kind of forever that's ever actually held up to scrutiny. Not the kind sworn in a backyard under string lights, the kind rebuilt quietly, one honest choice at a time, long after anyone else was still watching to see if it would last. The Mustang still sits in that garage, nearly finished now, a project they return to on weekends when Jonathan Harold is down for his nap, and the house goes quiet in that particular way houses do when something small and precious is sleeping down the hall. Some weekends they make real progress. Some weekends they just sit there, coffee cooling, talking about nothing and everything. The car itself has become something like a quiet promise that what's broken can be made whole again. Given enough time, enough honesty, enough two people willing to keep showing up for the slow work of fixing it.